Oh, me.
Brexit. What does it really mean? We've been hearing that word so much. So all you need to know about the UK leaving the EU, we're going to tell you, because Dr. Omar Hawthorne is with us. Lecturer, yes, I didn't say it wrong, Omar Hawthorne, lecturer, Department of Government at the UEMONA. Good morning. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. It's morning time.
14. You get that a lot, don't you?
Yes.
Omar, yeah. Okay. Unique.
So first thing is Brexit. Britain exiting the EU. That's how they coined the name. Why? Why would Britain want to leave the EU?
Initially, it was a campaign promise by Cameron to bring it to referendum to say, since the UK citizens seemingly want to leave, let's have a vote. And the thing with when you decide to make the process a vote, you don't know the outcome, and they leave one instead of the remain. So last
Did
week,
they think
Wednesday,
this is how it was going to go? I'm trying to remember what was happening. Leave was leading. Remain
no,
was leading.
Remain
Oh my
was
gosh,
leading.
yeah.
But then at the end of the day, with any election, it's a democratic process. So you're not win until the final vote has been counted.
Yeah. It's widely believed that that's part of why Cameron said, oh, well, I'm going to step down because I don't want to be a part of this process, and enter Theresa May, who has pretty much put things in motion. It takes 2 years,
Yes.
and she's already done the letter of intent. What happens over that 2-year process?
Within the 2-year process, this is where the UK will negotiate the terms on which it leaves the EU. The leaving part is in the formal process. It has been started, but since no member country has yet to leave the EU, this brings into fore how long will it take? Will it really take 2 years, or will the UK need to apply for an extension? And if it is that the UK decide to seek an extension, all members of the union must agree.
Is there fair that if the UK exits and it works,
If Britain exits.
Britain exits and it works, that there may be a chain reaction that other countries will want to start leaving the EU? Is that a real fear?
On a political term, for the most part, it will not necessarily be easy for other members. And this is where economically, you want a stable union after the UK leaves. However, from a political point of view, to some extent, you might want to be a little bit hard on the UK to not encourage other members to leave. And this is a case where everyone will need to renegotiate what sort of bilateral agreement, trade, etc. that you have. So by the UK leaving, you do not want to encourage other members to leave. So to some extent, it's not that you're going to politically punish the UK, but you still need to drive a hard bargain, as in the EU.
Do we get the impression that the Brits knew what they were in for when they signed up for this? It's kind of strikes me in one way as a Trumpian promise with the healthcare, and then he was like, oh, nobody knew healthcare was so complicated. Do you think they have any, because they say right after Brexit,
Most EU citizens were, what is the EU?
What is the EU?
And this is the case where when you're campaigning on a position, whether it was leave or remain, it's who best sells their argument. And the remain camp, for the most part, did not necessarily sell it as effectively as they should. And they did not necessarily tap into the domestic issues that were happening within the UK. And when you have economic issues within a country, quite often people tend to blame the foreigners, tend to blame the others. And it's the whole notion of the UK is weakening because of everybody else. And it's not just in the case of the EU, because we saw that with the US recently in the US election. So it's a global economic climate that way.
Yeah.
Part of the challenge as well is Scotland, Northern Ireland. They're saying, hold on a bit, Britain, you want to go, but we don't want to go, and this is unfair to us. So within the UK itself, there's still a challenge in terms of everyone agreeing to
There
this
might
exit.
be a possible referendum again by the Scottish people, in that because they largely voted to remain in the European Union.
Right.
But if it's the case that Scotland is allowed to leave the UK now to remain with the EU, what about Wales or what about Northern Ireland? Everybody else would possibly want to leave the UK. And it will no longer be the UK if Scots leave.
What's happening with Gibraltar?
But the state is the whole notion that when you look at the economic ties between the UK and the EU and the change that it will affect on the people within the international system. And it's not just for the British people, the UK people, or the EU members. It's a rippling effect across the international community because countries that rely on the EU and Jamaica and other Caribbean countries, we receive significant level of aid and support. A large part of our budgetary support comes from the European Union. So if you think of it in the context of post-Cotonou 2020, what will happen after the UK leaves?
Yeah. And particularly with the issue of Gibraltar, there's a long-standing issue between Britain and Spain in terms of who really owns Gibraltar. And because, geographically, where it is, how do they resolve that? Do the Gibraltarians get to say, we're Gibraltar own?
That's where the political aspect will come in because all EU members, they have a veto vote.
Yeah.
And just sometimes you wonder, do you want all 27? Well, all 27 members will be able to veto a particular issue to see how will Spain particular vote on this particular issue as it pertains to UK leaving the EU.
Yeah.
And think about what are the preconditions and what were the pre-negotiations prior to the UK opt-in, signing off as it pertains to Article 50.
Yeah. On a side note, we have an interesting history of Gibraltar,
Really?
Yeah, that during the World War, because of strategically where it was, they had to get the people off Gibraltar so the troops could go there. So they moved them to different parts of the world, and they were here in Jamaica at Mona.
Yeah.
Thus Gibraltar. That's why. Yeah.
Thank you, Delia, for that bit of history.
And afterwards, some of them moved back.
That's interesting.
Yeah. We have a strong history.
So as you
with Gibraltar.
mentioned, Mona, though, let's bring it closer home again, Doc, and tell us what some of the implications are for us. Because people hear Brexit and they think, it's happening over there.
Right.
It's not about a we, but there are implications.
There are implications and there's also benefits.
Yeah.
In that we have always had a long history with the UK, and that will not necessarily change. It's how we renegotiate our terms or bilateral agreements with the European Union, and as it pertains to not just Jamaica, but all ACP countries, as in Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. And as I mentioned before, the post-Cotonou, in that what will the post-Cotonou agreement look like at the end of 2020 with the UK leaving? What will the conditions as it pertains to the UK negotiating leaving the EU and the members that rely on the UK for its aid and benefit?
Because now they're going to have to think about not being able to benefit from some of those the EU partnerships.
Alternative sources.
Yeah. Wow.
But the EU,
The world
it's
has
within
turned
the EU
upside down.
interest to still remain and be vital partners with Jamaica and other Caribbean countries. And that might not necessarily change in any time soon. The EU Development Fund supports Jamaica in the region. And if you think about the budgetary support for the Minister of Finance, the Justice Minister, I should say, which was signed off on last December, if I remember correctly, Jamaica received the largest budgetary support for the Justice Minister, not just within the Caribbean, but throughout the different world as it pertains to EU relations in the terms of justice reform. But that is from 2017 to 2020. So the whole notion of what will happen as it pertains to post-Cotonou, because we will be negotiating that leading up to 2020.
We need to grab everything now.
I know.
Before
Well, you just tell them, so I mean.
Yeah, but it's also to look towards the future. This is not the end of the EU, and that is why the terms on which the UK leave and how the UK will renegotiate with the European Union is to facilitate a stronger European Union and not necessarily allow for every other member to leave and cherry pick as he or she feels.
It's an interesting time in the world, eh?
Yeah.
Parallels between what's going on in Britain and what's going on in the US?
The US is almost a different case by itself in that, and it's a case of populism. The UK, the Leave campaign won on the populist notion, and likewise President Trump, he capitalized on the populist sentiment, focused on national issues rather than the international community. And if you look at France's election, which is coming up within the end of this month, April, and then Germany in September, to say what aspect will win at the end.
My word. It's I don't know.
It's exciting.
Yeah, of course
As a
it would be.
international relations.
The world is upside
Yeah,
down.
yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Omar
Thanks for
Hawthorne.
having
I
me.
appreciate your insight this morning. Dr. Omar Hawthorne, lecturer with the Department of Government at the UWI Mona. Take a break. We'll be right back with more on Smile after this.